Here we've got the Laurentide ice sheet and the Cordilleran ice sheet. If you look at this box right here, this is one of the areas I focused my research on because these landscapes were created by the greatest floods ever documented in the history of planet Earth. And I've led multiple tours out there. We've got tours coming up this summer. We'll be going out there again. Here's another map. I just did this graphic to try to show that there were these two great ice sheets. Laurentide ice sheet is roughly the size of the ice sheet that covers the South Pole. The Cordilleran ice sheet is about roughly the size of the ice sheet that now covers Greenland, right? They began to accumulate around 26,000 years ago in what's called the final phase of the Wisconsin Ice Age. And somewhere by 14,000 years ago, they had grown together. And then there was the first spike of warming, and this area between the two ice sheets opened up, and you may have heard the term ice-free corridor. That was considered to be the route by which migrants came across the Bering Land Bridge and were able to move into unglaciated North America. There was definitely an ice-free corridor, but it was almost certainly not the only avenue for the colonization of the Western Hemisphere. The catastrophes that closed the ice sheet, that closed the ice age, were so catastrophic that it's likely the almost the entire North American continent, the unglaciated and Central America, was depopulated. And then, then this was the rapid disappearance of what's called the Clovis culture, which was existing during those last centuries before the great global upheavals ended the Ice Age. And what I have been exploring is these great meltwater floods that issued off of the ice sheet. And I'm not going to go into some of the controversies here because we don't have time, other than that there is a sort of a uniformitarian controversy or uniformitarian explanation and a more catastrophic explanation. And obviously I lean towards the latter rather than the former. I think that the gradualistic interpretations don't make any sense at all. But in June, we're going to be, in May and September, I did two tours. That the tour where I was talking about that we were on where we got the COVID, right? That was a tour up to this area here. And what we were looking at is I was taking people around and basically teaching them how to read the language of catastrophe writ large into the surface of the earth, how to recognize the fact that the kinds of landscape features that you would be looking for. We might look at recessional cataracts. We might look at giant point bars, gravel deposits, boulder deposits, slot canyons, potholes, like I was talking about that I saw when I was a kid. There's many diagnostic features for these gigantic hydrological events that were the primary agency sculpting the post-Ice Age landscape and leaving these imprints of catastrophe. So the two expeditions we did, the one in May and the one in September, were exploring this area. Now, the conventional explanation is that there was a gigantic proglacial lake occupying the valleys of the mountain valleys of western Montana. And this lake broke through an ice dam, which was right here, and the draining of this lake created what is called the Channel Scablands, which was all the light blue that you see here. I don't believe that. I believe that all of this water came from rapidly melting ice of the Cordilleran Glacier ice sheet, right? We're not going to get into the details of that. I've extensively written and done podcasts about that, and I'm going to be going into additional information as well that I think makes the case that we have to be looking at rapid glacial melting to the north. But anyways, this June, we're going to be doing an excursion into the mountains of western Montana. And we're going to be looking at evidence for these gigantic water flows through these mountain valleys. And I could show you just for the sake of it, while we got a few minutes left, I'm going to jump ahead to a couple of things. This is a satellite view of Eastern Washington, taken from 500 miles up. And what you can see is that this is the Columbia Basalt Plateau, and the darker areas are exposed basalt bedrock. And then the other areas is this topsoil, this very interesting, unique topsoil called loess, which happens to be extremely fertile. Because it's Eastern Washington, though, it's a semi-desert area. It gets only about 15 inches of rainfall per year. But if you add water to the loess, boom, it just explodes with fertility. And this is what you see down here, this red area is where they're doing extensive irrigation. And so there's crops and orchards and all of this down here. But what you see here is these giant scars in the landscape where huge volumes of meltwater discharge. Now, the volume of meltwater, let's say coming down this scabland tract that you see right here, was on the order of 300 to 400 million cubic feet per second. Now, to give you an idea of what that is, the largest documented floods in North America were the 1993 and the 1923 floods of the Mississippi River. You guys aren't old enough to remember the great flood of 1993. Do some research online. You'll learn about it. It was, I think, possibly still one of the most expensive natural disasters in American history. So the Great Flood of 1990. Now, normally, I think the discharge of the Mississippi River at its mouth is perhaps a couple of 100,000 cubic feet per second. The peak discharge during the Great Flood of 1993 was about 1 million, just over 1 million cubic feet per second. Wow. The flood that did this was 300 to 400 times greater than that. Oh, wow. Now you can take, let's say 350 million and divide it by 150,000, and you're going to see that this is over 2,000 times the volume of the modern Mississippi River at its mouth. Wow. Now, you cannot explain current flows like that by reference to anything that's going on right now. And this is this is only one of the meltwater paths. There's another one over here that was almost as big. And then as we go further west, we have Grand Coulee, which was another discharge conduit. And it was also carrying between 300 and 400 million cubic feet per second. Then you have this arcuate feature, which is moraine, because this was a glacier lobe. And you had a massive meltwater discharge coming off the snout of this glacier here. It also, this called Moses Coulee, and it also was 350 to 400 million cubic feet per second. Now you start adding these up, we're over 1 billion cubic feet per second. Now, if you want to try to also have another comparison, if you were to take every single bit of flowing water on Earth, every creek, stream, and river, and I'm talking about all the great rivers, the Amazon, the Mississippi, the Nile, the Po, the Mackenzie, the Yukon, the Congo River, the Danube, the Yellow River of China, all the rivers on Earth. If you were to add all of those flows together, it wouldn't even be 1/10, more like 1/20th of the peak discharges at the end of the Ice Age, when these ice sheets are undergoing incomprehensible, fast, violent, catastrophic meltdown. Wow. And guess what? Who is explaining it? Nobody. The people who are studying these floods, and many of them are paleohydrologists, are locked into this ice dam model. Well, what's happening is it's beginning to shift now, because the evidence is accruing every year that Earth was victimized by a massive catastrophic cosmic event at the Younger Dryas boundary. And this cosmic event has left its fingerprints all over the Earth in the form of impact proxies, microspherules, nanodiamonds, micrograins, soot from massive wildfires. So again, the uniformitarian guys are really reluctant to go there, because what's going to happen is, if we look at the real history of climate change on planet Earth, we're going to realize that there have been things. Just picture the graph that I showed you from the ice cores. There have been changes of climate that have been orders of magnitude greater than anything we've seen in modern history. And we're only at the beginning of figuring out what caused those climate changes. And this is why I get so frustrated when people say, oh, the science is settled, the debate is over. Anything that happens now, a tornado, it's humans' fault. It's anthropogenic. A hurricane, oh. But if you actually look at the data, the actual data, which I will be presenting on my website in detail, you will see that accumulated cyclonic energy is down over the last 50 years, which is both hurricanes and typhoons. Tornadoes down, wildfires down. Right now on my podcast, my Cosmographia podcast, I'm getting into some of the forest fires and wildfires that occurred in the late 19th, early 20th century. The Great Burn of 1910, for example, burned up over 3 million acres of land in 2 days.
Wow. As
bad as some of our modern wildfires have been, they don't even approach that in magnitude. And I'm getting into I'm examining that. We're 2 episodes in now on the Cosmographia podcast where I'm really diving into a study of these great fires.
It is widely known that the tobacco and diet industries lobby governments with scientific propaganda for years until proven guilty in court. The artificial treatment of our water is the next corporate deception.
For example, virtually every nation in Europe has rejected the use of artificial fluoride. International studies since the 40s have repeatedly shown that endocrine and neurological effects increase after repeated consumption, even at the levels accepted by U.S. government.
Epic Water Filters is the most thorough industry-grade filtration system that Houston Ensemble has ever used. They reduce heavy metals upwards of 99.5%, such as lead and mercury, bacteria like E. coli, and poisons like chromium, nitrate, and fluoride.
Join us in our journey to living a toxin-free life and get your Epic Water Filter using discount code Houston Ensemble, lowercase, one word. That's Houston Ensemble, lowercase, one word, for 20% off your Epic Water Filter.